Hello, and welcome back to LPBW Update, your number one source for the news and analysis that goes deeper than what you see on the screen. We have an explosive and frankly deeply disturbing story breaking today. A story that, if our sources are correct, could represent the final irreversible fracture in the Roloff family. What we're about to discuss involves allegations of the highest order, forgery, fraud, and a shocking conspiracy to strip Amy Roloff of her power, her legacy, and her very autonomy. The hook for this story is as chilling as it gets. They tried to use her health as a weapon to steal her legacy. They never imagined her doctor would be her secret weapon in the fight back. This is a story of profound betrayal, and it cuts to the very core of the family's long and bitter struggle for control of Roloff Farms. Before we dive into the sordid details of this alleged plot, if you believe in standing up for the truth and you want to follow every twist and turn of this developing situation, please take a moment to hit that like button. It tells YouTube you value this kind of in-depth reporting. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. You will not want to miss a single update on this one. This is the story that could change everything. All right, let's get into it. For years, we've watched the slow motion dismantling of the Roloff family dream. The central conflict, as we all know, has been the fate of Roloff Farms. It's more than just land. It's the legacy, the brand, the entire world they built in front of the cameras. The sale of the north side of the farm to Amy was supposed to be a resolution, a way for her to secure her future and maintain her stake. But according to the information we're receiving for Matt and Caryn, that wasn't enough. Amy's remaining voting shares in the farm's LLC represent the last piece of the puzzle, the final barrier to Matt having absolute, unchallenged control. And the lengths they allegedly went to in order to seize that control are nothing short of monstrous. The foundational lie, the very cornerstone of this entire alleged scheme, was the false narrative that Amy Roloff's health has been secretly and steadily declining for years. The picture they intended to paint was of a woman who was no longer of sound mind. They weren't just suggesting she was a bad negotiator or emotional. They were allegedly building a case that she was medically unfit, confused, erratic, and fundamentally incapable of managing her own business affairs. It's an accusation designed to strip a person of their dignity and their credibility in one fell swoop. This wasn't about a business disagreement anymore. This was a move to have her declared legally incompetent, a maneuver that would not only give them control of her shares, but would effectively place her under their power. The story of how this plot was uncovered begins not in a boardroom or a lawyer's office, but with an act of quiet loyalty from someone who remembers the real Amy Roloff. Our sources speak of a former longtime farm employee, someone who worked there for over a decade and always held a deep respect for Amy. This person, let's call her Maria to protect her identity, was on the property for a brief, unrelated reason when she happened to overhear a phone conversation. It was Caryn, speaking in hushed but confident tones. Maria couldn't hear the whole conversation, but she heard a few key phrases that made her blood run cold. Phrases like the final report, Amy's doctor's report will seal it, and guardianship. Maria was horrified. She knew Amy. She had worked with her day in and day out. She knew her to be sharp, detail-oriented, and fiercely protective of her interests. The idea that Amy was somehow medically unwell or losing her cognitive faculties was utterly absurd. But the confidence in Caryn's voice was chilling. This wasn't just gossip. It sounded like a plan, a strategy already in motion. After a sleepless night wrestling with her conscience, Maria made a decision. She found a way to contact Amy privately, away from the farm, and told her everything she had heard. Imagine being Amy, You're building a new life with Chris. You've navigated a painful divorce. You've fought to secure your portion of the farm, and you think you finally reached a place of stability. Then you get a call like this, a warning that your ex-husband and his partner are not just trying to outmaneuver you in business, but are allegedly plotting to have you declared mentally incompetent. The violation is almost unimaginable. It's an attack on your very identity. But after the initial shock and the wave of nausea that must have come with it, Amy's famous resilience kicked in. She didn't panic. She got strategic. Her very first call was to her actual longtime primary care physician. Let's call him Dr. Evans. He's a man who has managed her health for nearly 2 decades through pregnancies, the stresses of filming, her divorce, everything. Amy laid out the incredible paranoid-sounding story. She believed there was a plot to use fraudulent medical records against her. She told him about the overheard conversation, the mention of a doctor's report, and her fear that they would try to forge his name or his diagnosis. Now, any doctor would be appalled by this. It's a gross violation of medical ethics and a massive legal liability. Dr. Evans, according to our sources, was not just appalled, he was furious on Amy's behalf. He knew her health better than anyone. He knew she was in excellent physical and cognitive condition. The idea that someone would weaponize his profession to commit fraud against his patient was an affront. And so, right there in his office, they devised a counter plan. It was a plan of brilliant simplicity and devastating effectiveness. The plan was this. Amy would do nothing out of the ordinary. She would continue to attend her regular appointments with Dr. Evans. She would go about her life knowing that she might be under surveillance, knowing that every public interaction could be twisted or misinterpreted. She would essentially allow Matt and Caryn to build their trap, all while she and her doctor were building a fortress of truth. Behind the scenes, Dr. Evans took extraordinary measures. He began keeping a separate, encrypted, and legally secured file on Amy. In this file, he meticulously documented every single interaction. After each checkup, he would perform a standard cognitive assessment, the kind used to screen for dementia or other cognitive issues, and document in excruciating detail Amy's perfect scores. He noted her sharp memory, her clear-headed discussion of complex financial matters related to her estate planning, and her overall vibrant health. This file became a real-time diary of her well-being, authenticated and dated with every entry. Furthermore, and this is a critical detail, he logged every single external inquiry regarding Amy's medical records. He instructed his staff that any request from any source, no matter how seemingly official, was to be flagged and brought directly to him. This created a paper trail, a record of who was sniffing around and when. Meanwhile, as Amy and her doctor were quietly building their arsenal of truth, Matt and Caryn were allegedly moving forward with their plan of deception. They engaged a law firm, one known for aggressive take-no-prisoners tactics in estate incompetency disputes. Their goal was to petition the court for a competency hearing, a legal proceeding to determine if an individual is capable of making their own financial and medical decisions. To win such a case, you need overwhelming evidence, and the most powerful evidence you can present is a damning report from the person's own doctor. This is where the alleged forgery comes in. Knowing they would never get a real report from Dr. Evans that suited their narrative, they allegedly set out to create one. We're told they managed to obtain letterhead from Dr. Evans's practice. How they did this is still a matter of speculation, but it could be as simple as lifting it from a standard bill or an old appointment reminder. They then drafted a letter, a complete and utter fabrication, designed to be the smoking gun in their case. This forged document, which would later become the centerpiece of the court hearing, was a masterpiece of medical-sounding fiction. It was allegedly written in the detached, clinical tone of a concerned physician. It spoke of a pattern of cognitive decline observed over the past 18 months. It used phrases like impaired executive function, significant lapses in short-term memory, and difficulty processing complex financial information. It even invented specific false anecdotes, suggesting that during appointments, Amy had appeared confused about recent events and exhibited emotional volatility inconsistent with her baseline. The letter concluded with a grave and fraudulent recommendation that for her own protection, Amy Roloff's financial and legal affairs should be placed under a conservatorship. And at the bottom of this document, this career-ending, life-altering lie was a forged signature of Dr. Evans. With their weapon forged, they began to lay the groundwork. Subtly at first, sources close to the family describe a noticeable shift in how Matt and Caryn would speak about Amy. In conversations with mutual friends or business associates, they would allegedly drop little seeds of doubt. Amy's been a bit forgetful lately. You have to repeat things for her. Or, she got really confused about the property line details the other day. It's a little worrying. It was a classic gaslighting campaign designed to create a chorus of whispers that would seem to corroborate the doctor's report when it was eventually revealed. They were creating a false reality, preparing the battlefield for the legal assault to come. The day the legal papers were served was, for Amy, the moment the Cold War turned hot. A process server arrived at her door and handed her the thick envelope containing the petition for the competency hearing. And there it was, in black and white. The litany of lies, the twisting of her character, and the forged letter from Dr. Evans. Seeing the words on the page, the clinical and cruel descriptions of a mental decline she was not experiencing, alongside the forged signature of a doctor she trusted, must have been a profound moment of betrayal. This was no longer just a suspicion or a warning from a friend. This was a formal legal declaration of war against her very mind. Amy immediately took the documents to her own legal counsel. Her lawyer, a sharp and experienced litigator, read through the petition and the attached exhibits. When he got to the letter from Dr. Evans, he looked up at Amy, his expression grim. He knew, as she did, that this was the crux of their entire case. But when Amy told him the full story about the warning from the former employee, her secret collaboration with the real Dr. Evans, and the secure file of meticulously documented evidence of her perfect health, a slow smile spread across the lawyer's face. He realized Matt and Caryn hadn't just brought a knife to a gunfight. They had brought a water pistol while Amy was waiting with a cannon. They had built their entire case on a single, provable lie, and they had no idea that their lie was about to be spectacularly and publicly detonated. The stage was now set for a courtroom showdown of epic proportions. On one side, Matt and Caryn, armed with a forged document and a narrative of concern for Amy's failing health. They felt they were on the verge of a final victory, securing the farm and the Roloff legacy for themselves under the guise of protecting Amy from herself. They believed their plan was airtight, their evidence unassailable. On the other side, Amy, her lawyer, and Dr. Evans, holding the truth like a trump card, waiting for the perfect moment to play it. They knew the competency hearing was a trap, but it wasn't a trap for Amy. It was a trap they were about to spring on her accusers. But there was another piece to this puzzle, a twist that even Amy and her team couldn't have predicted. This twist came from deep inside the enemy camp. It came from a person who was a direct witness to the alleged fraud being committed and whose conscience could no longer bear the weight of it. We're talking about the unexpected internal betrayal. According to our sources, a paralegal at the very law firm Matt and Caryn had hired was growing increasingly horrified by the case they were building. This paralegal was a young, idealistic person who got into law to help people, not to destroy them with lies. Day after day, this paralegal was tasked with managing the files for the Roloff competency case. They saw the emails, they heard the phone calls, and they handled the documents, and they saw the original draft of the forged doctor's letter. This draft was not a clean, typed final version. It was a working document, and it contained something truly damning. Handwritten notes in the margins, notes that guided the fabrication, little instructions that revealed the cold, calculated intent behind the lies. And the paralegal, who had seen Caryn's handwriting on other documents, on memos and sticky notes, recognized it immediately. The notes were chillingly specific. Next to a sentence about Amy's general state of mind, a scribbled instruction, make this sound more severe. Beside a paragraph about her business acumen, the words, add a part about memory loss. In another section, a note that said, mention confusion over dates. It was a blueprint for character assassination, allegedly in Caryn's own hand. The paralegal felt sick. This wasn't just aggressive legal strategy. This was a criminal act. It was a conspiracy to defraud the court and to ruin an innocent woman's life, all for a piece of land. After weeks of agonizing, the paralegal made a choice. They knew they could be fired and even disbarred for what they were about to do, but they also knew they couldn't live with themselves if they stayed silent. One night, after everyone else had gone home, they made a high-quality photocopy of the draft letter with the handwritten notes. They typed a brief, anonymous cover letter, simply stating, "You need to see this. This is how they built the lie." They put it all in a plain manila envelope, addressed it to Amy Roloff's attorney, and dropped it in a mailbox miles away from their home or office. They had just anonymously armed Amy's team with the one thing they didn't have: proof of intent in the alleged handwriting of one of the conspirators. This document wasn't just a smoking gun, it was a signed confession. As the date of the competency hearing approached, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Matt and Caryn projected an image of somber concern. They likely told the few people in their inner circle that this was the hardest thing they've ever had to do, a painful but necessary step for Amy's own good. They were playing the part of reluctant saviors. Amy, on the other hand, maintained a quiet, steely composure. She knew the truth. She knew the trap was set. She and her team had decided to let the hearing begin. They wanted Matt and Caryn's lawyer to stand up in a court of law in front of a judge and present the forged letter as fact. They wanted the lie to be entered into the official court record before they systematically dismantled it, piece by fraudulent piece. The day of the hearing arrived. The courtroom was a private chamber closed to the public, but the stakes felt immense. Amy sat beside her lawyer, her expression unreadable. Across the room, Matt and Caryn sat with their legal team, looking for all the world like a worried family. Their lawyer began. He laid out their case with practiced solemnity. He spoke of Amy's uncharacteristic behavior, her troubling decisions, and the growing concern among those who love her. He painted a picture of a woman sadly losing her grip, a matriarch whose legacy was now at risk because of her own declining faculties. And then came the moment of truth. The lawyer for Matt and Caryn held up a document. "Your Honor," he said, his voice resonating with false gravity, "we submit as Exhibit A letter from Amy Roloff's longtime physician, Dr. Evans. In it, he details his own grave concerns for his patient's cognitive health and recommends for her own well-being that the court intervene." He handed the forged letter to the clerk, who passed it to the judge. The lie was now officially on the record. The trap had been baited. Amy's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor," he said calmly, "we have no objection to the submission of this letter. In fact, we are so interested in what Dr. Evans has to say that we have taken the liberty of calling him as our first witness." A ripple of shock went through Matt and Caryn's side of the room. This was not part of their plan. They never imagined Amy's actual doctor would show up. They likely assumed he would be bound by doctor-patient confidentiality or would simply refuse to be involved in a messy family dispute. They were wrong. The courtroom door opened, and in walked Dr. Evans, carrying a locked briefcase. He took the stand, was sworn in, and the entire dynamic of the room shifted. The hunter was about to become the prey. The first part of this unbelievable courtroom drama was about to unfold, and no one, especially not Matt and Caryn, was prepared for the truth bomb that was about to be dropped. We will delve into that explosive testimony and the shocking fallout in the next part of our report. The foundation of lies was about to crack, and the resulting earthquake would shake the Roloff family to its very core. When we left off, the scene was set for a courtroom detonation. Matt and Caryn's competency hearing against Amy Roloff was underway. Their entire case rested on a single piece of evidence. A letter allegedly from Amy's longtime doctor, Dr. Evans, detailing a supposed cognitive decline. Their lawyer had just submitted this forgery as Exhibit A. And then, in a move they never saw coming, Amy's lawyer called the real Dr. Evans to the stand. He has just been sworn in, and the palpable tension in the room has shifted from a somber hearing to a high-stakes interrogation. Matt and Caryn, who walked in as the concerned petitioners, are about to find themselves on trial. Amy's lawyer, a man named Mr. Davies, approached the witness stand. His demeanor was calm, methodical. He began with simple, foundational questions, each one a brick in the wall of credibility he was building around his witness. Dr. Evans, would you please state your full name and occupation for the record? He did. And how long have you been a practicing physician? Over 25 years. Are you, in fact, the primary care physician for Miss Amy Roloff? I am, Dr. Evans confirmed. And for how many years have you been her doctor? Just shy of 20 years, the doctor replied, his voice steady and clear. Davies let that number hang in the air. 19 years. This wasn't some new doctor who had seen Amy once or twice. This was a man who knew her medical history inside and out. Davies walked over to the clerk's table and picked up the document that had been entered as Exhibit A. He approached the witness stand and handed it to Dr. Evans. Doctor, he said, I'd like you to take a moment to carefully examine Exhibit A. Dr. Evans put on his reading glasses and read the letter. The room was silent. Amy watched him, her face a mask of composure. Matt and Caryn leaned forward, a flicker of uncertainty now visible in their eyes. Their lawyer shifted uncomfortably in his chair. After a long minute, Dr. Evans looked up, his expression one of cold, professional fury. He removed his glasses. Dr. Evans, Davies began, his voice still level, this letter is presented on what appears to be your office's letterhead. It purports to be a medical summary of your patient, Ms. Roloff. Can you confirm for the court that this is an authentic document from your practice? Dr. Evans looked directly at the judge. Your Honor, he said, his voice ringing with authority, this document is a complete and utter fabrication. A gasp, quickly suppressed, came from Matt and Caryn's side of the room. Their lawyer's face went white. Davies pressed on, each question a hammer blow against the foundation of their case. So to be perfectly clear, Doctor, did you write this letter? I did not, Dr. Evans stated unequivocally. Did you authorize anyone else to write this letter on your behalf? Absolutely not. Dr. Evans, at the bottom of the page, there is a signature, your name. Is that your signature? It is not, he said with contempt. It is a clumsy and obvious forgery. Obvious in what way? Davies asked, leading him on. Several ways, the doctor explained, now addressing the judge directly as an expert in his field. First, the medical terminology used is sensationalistic and vague. A real clinical summary would use precise diagnostic language, not phrases like emotional volatility or pattern of decline, without specific quantifiable data to back it up. This reads more like a screenplay than a medical report. Second, it references specific fabricated events during appointments that never occurred. Third, and most importantly, the conclusion it draws that Ms. Roloff is suffering from cognitive impairment is the polar opposite of the truth. This was the moment, the pivot from defense to offense. The opposite of the truth, Doctor, Davies prompted. Please explain that to the court. This is when Dr. Evans reached down and placed his locked briefcase on his lap. He clicked it open. Your Honor, he said, several months ago, Ms. Roloff came to me with a deeply disturbing concern. She had reason to believe that a fraudulent attempt might be made to misrepresent her health for financial gain. At her request, and with my full cooperation as her physician, we began to create a meticulous and preemptive record of her cognitive and physical health. He pulled out a thick, bound file. This, he said, holding it up, is the true medical record of Amy Roloff for the past 6 months. Following every one of her regularly scheduled appointments, I conducted a full mini mental state examination, or MMSE, a standardized tool for assessing cognitive function. Ms. Roloff has, on every single occasion, scored a perfect 30 out of 30. That score indicates 0 cognitive impairment, 0 memory loss, and superior executive function. She is, from a neurological and cognitive standpoint, in absolutely excellent health. In fact, he added, looking over at Amy with a slight smile, she's sharper than most people half her age. He then proceeded to read excerpts from his official, dated, and signed notes. October 12th, patient discussed complex contractual details regarding her LLC and estate planning with perfect clarity and recall. MMSC score 30. November 16th, patient recounted details of a cross-country trip, including flight numbers and hotel names from weeks prior without hesitation. MMSE score 30. January 5th, patient engaged in a sophisticated discussion about market trends affecting her business investments. MMSE score 30. He was painting a picture not of a woman in decline, but of a sharp, engaged, and fully competent business person. Each entry he read was another shovel of dirt on the grave of Matt and Caryn's petition. Davies let the testimony sink in. The judge was now staring daggers at Matt and Caryn's lawyer, who looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. Matt, washen-faced, staring blankly ahead. Caryn was subtly shaking her head, as if in disbelief that their plan could unravel so spectacularly. Davies wasn't finished. Dr. Evans, he continued, in your professional opinion, is there any medical basis whatsoever for the claims made in the fraudulent letter, Exhibit A? None whatsoever, Dr. Evans stated firmly. The claims in that letter are not just false, they are a malicious lie. And then the final crushing blow from the doctor's testimony. Furthermore, Your Honor, Dr. Evans said, consulting another log from his file, as part of our protocol, my office began logging all third-party inquiries into Ms. Roloff's health records. Over the past 4 months, we received 3 separate requests from a private investigation firm, a firm which, a simple search reveals, is frequently retained by the very law firm representing the petitioners in this case. He had just connected their lawyers directly to the information gathering, showing a pattern of suspicious activity that predated the hearing. The case was in shambles. The competency hearing was effectively over. Any competent lawyer would have stood up at that point, withdrawn the petition, and begged for the court's mercy. But they didn't get the chance. Because Mr. Davies had one more card to play, a card he had received in a plain manila envelope. Your Honor, Davies said, his voice dropping, the petitioner's case is built on a forgery, but we believe it is crucial for the court to understand not just that this fraud was committed, but precisely how it was conceived and by whom. He approached the clerk with a new document. We would like to enter into evidence Exhibit B. It was the photocopy of the draft letter, the one sent by the anonymous paralegal. This document, Your Honor, is what we believe to be the original draft of the forged letter. As you can see, it contains the same fabricated medical narrative, but it also contains something more: handwritten notes in the margins, offering instructions on how to refine the lies. A paralegal from Davies's firm set up a projector, and an image of the draft letter was displayed on a large screen for the entire courtroom to see. The typed text was there, but highlighted in circles were the handwritten scribbles. Davies read them aloud, his voice dripping with theatrical contempt. Make this sound more severe, add a part about memory loss, mention confusion over dates. We need this to be stronger on the financial incompetence part. The air in the room was ice. These were not the words of a concerned family. These were the stage directions for a character assassination. This was a blueprint for fraud. Caryn stared at the screen, at her own handwriting magnified for all to see, and for the first time, her mask of composure crumbled. A look of pure, unadulterated panic flashed across her face. Matt looked from the screen to Caryn, his expression a mixture of fury and dawning horror. Had he been a willing participant in this level of detailed fraud, or had he been led to believe the evidence was more legitimate? At that moment, it didn't matter. They were tied together, and they were sinking fast. This document reveals the cold, calculated intent behind this fraud, Davies declared. But one question remains: who wrote these instructions? Who was the architect of this smear campaign? He paused, letting the question hang in the air. To answer that, Your Honor, the defense calls our final witness. The door opened again, and a woman carrying a portfolio walked in. The defense calls Dr. Elena Shapiro, a court-certified forensic document examiner. The handwriting expert took the stand. For the next 20 minutes, Dr. Shapiro gave a masterclass in forensic linguistics and graphology. She detailed her credentials, her experience with the FBI and state law enforcement, and her methodology for handwriting analysis. Davies then presented her with Exhibit B, the draft letter. And then he introduced Exhibit C, a collection of documents containing known verified samples of Caryn Chandler's handwriting, which had been subpoenaed from years of farm business records, invoices she had signed, memos she had written, farm event plans she had initialed. The expert placed them side by side under a document camera, projecting them onto the screen. She began to point out the similarities, her tone precise and academic. Note the distinctive upward slant of the T cross. It is consistent across all known samples and the marginalia on Exhibit B. Observe the unique formation of the capital A with the slight loop at the apex. Again, a perfect match. The pressure in spacing, the baseline habits, the formation of the R and S, letter combinations, all of it points to a single author. After a meticulous point-by-point comparison that left no room for doubt, Davies asked the final, devastating question. Dr. Shapiro, having conducted your full analysis, do you have a professional opinion as to whether the person who wrote the known samples in Exhibit C is the same person who wrote the handwritten notes on the draft in Exhibit B? Dr. Shapiro looked at the judge, then at the jury, and finally, her gaze lingered for a second on Caryn. It is my professional opinion, to the highest degree of scientific certainty, she stated, that the author is one and the same. The handwritten notes were written by Caryn Chandler. It was over. Complete, total annihilation. Matt and Caryn's lawyer slowly sat down and put his head in his hands. He knew his case was not only lost, but that he was now implicated in a massive fraud against the court. Matt was staring at Caryn, his face a thundercloud of betrayal and rage. Caryn was looking at the floor, her entire world collapsing in on her. And Amy Roloff sat there, her expression still calm, but with a glimmer of righteous vindication in her eyes. She hadn't just defeated them, she had exposed them. The judge, a man known for his stoic temperament, was visibly enraged. He took off his glasses and rubbed his temples, a clear sign of his fury. "Mr. Davies," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "you and your client may sit down. Your work here is done." Then he turned his wrath upon the petitioners. "In 20 years on this bench," he began, his voice rising with every word, "I have never witnessed such a flagrant, malicious, and despicable abuse of the legal process. You came into this courtroom under the guise of concern, pretending to act in the best interest of a family member. But what you have done is commit a calculated and conspiratorial fraud." He looked directly at Matt and Caryn. "You sought to weaponize this court. You sought to use the law as a bludgeon to steal a woman's autonomy, her reputation, and her property, all based on a foundation of despicable lies and forged documents. You have not only failed, but you have exposed yourselves as perpetrators of a serious crime." His ruling came down like a guillotine. "The petition for a competency hearing is hereby dismissed with extreme prejudice, meaning this matter can never again be brought before any court. It is finished." But he didn't stop there. "Furthermore," he thundered, "I am not simply dismissing this case. I am referring this entire matter, including the testimony of Dr. Evans, the testimony of Dr. Shapiro, and Exhibits A and B, to the District Attorney's Office for immediate criminal investigation. The potential charges will include, but are not limited to, felony forgery, conspiracy to commit fraud, and perjury." The color drained completely from Matt and Caryn's faces. The word felony echoed in the silent courtroom. They had walked in hoping to gain control of a business. They were walking out as potential felons, facing the terrifying prospect of indictment, a criminal trial, and actual prison time. The judge had one last target. He glared at their attorney. "As for you, counsel," he spat, "your conduct in presenting a forged document to this court, whether you were a knowing participant or simply grossly negligent, is an affront to your profession. I am referring you to the State Bar Association for a full ethics investigation. I would advise you to retain your own counsel. You are going to need it." He banged his gavel, the sound cracking like a gunshot in the stunned silence. "This hearing is adjourned." With that, he swept out of the courtroom. In his wake, he left the smoldering ruins of Matt and Caryn's plan. They were left sitting there, utterly broken, surrounded by their high-priced legal team, who now couldn't even look at them. Across the room, Amy stood up, took a deep breath, and quietly walked out with her lawyer, her head held high. She had won. She had protected her legacy, her freedom, and her name. But the cost was the final, absolute destruction of her family. The fallout from this will be catastrophic. Matt and Caryn are now facing a criminal investigation that could lead to years in prison and financial ruin. Their reputations are irrevocably shattered. Every public statement of family first they have ever made is now rendered a cynical, hypocritical lie. The lawyer who took their case is likely facing the end of his career. And the Roloff family, as we know it, has ceased to exist. There is no coming back from this. This wasn't a fight over a farm. It was a fight for Amy's soul, and the people who tried to steal it are now facing the full, crushing weight of the law. Which brings us back to the central, heartbreaking question. This is arguably the most disgusting accusation yet. In your opinion, is there any possibility of a relationship for this family after a betrayal this deep? Can bridges that have been nuked from orbit ever be rebuilt? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for joining us for this in-depth report here at LPBW Update. We will be following every development of the criminal investigation and will bring you updates as soon as they become available. This story is far from over. If you appreciate this kind of deep dive analysis, please hit that like button, Subscribe to the channel and ring the bell for notifications. You won't want to miss what comes next.